Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner, and I'm joined by the mighty head book buyer of Forbidden Planet, Laura Dodd. And today it is our absolute privilege to be talking to one of our favourite authors, Jeff VanderMeer, about his epic new novel, Hummingbird Salamander. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, you know what, mate? It's really wonderful to see you again. And I think you look in great shape. I can see that you've dressed the set and you've got you've got your book covers behind you. As I mentioned on the run-up and as we mentioned off camera, we're both huge fans of your work. And Laura has been looking forward to this interview for quite some time. So over to you, mate.
Okay, yes. So what can you tell us about your newest book, Hummingbird Salamander, which has just come out with Fourth Estate HarperCollins in the UK?
Well, it's kind of a page turner this time, which I know will delight and also mystify some fans who have read like Annihilation, which is a little more surreal, perhaps. This woman named Jane, who's a security analyst, receives the strange gift of a taxidermied hummingbird by a dead woman who's an eco-activist who she has never met. And just by receiving this gift, she goes down a rabbit hole of paranoia and conspiracy because it triggers something in terms of her receiving this gift, and people are almost after her from the onset. And so she has this mystery to unravel at the same time that she hopes it doesn't unravel her life. Even as she has things in her past that come to light that are also, I think, very relevant to the plot. And it basically is a speculative eco-thriller that exists in kind of our recent past, goes into our present, and then like 10 seconds into the future. And, so I hope readers really enjoy the propulsion of the plot this go around. I'm very much looking forward to reader reaction.
Definitely. And you just mentioned before about the kind of flashbacks and then the kind of moving to present day. Was that difficult for you to kind of keep track of?
I think it's more that Jane is looking back on events and writing the account from a certain point in time. And so I like the idea of her haunting the narrative and kind of haunting the narrative with what's, the reader with what's going to happen next, that she already knows has happened. And so there are moments that are fraught with foreshadowing. And it adds an extra layer of characterization. I really hope people enjoy this character because I'm very fond of her. She's very contradictory and she can be very ornery. She's an extremely strong person, but also strong-willed. And I hope people find her interesting because I thought she was fascinating to write.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. So Jeff, ecology and the environment, ongoing themes in your work, I find as a reader. And Laura and I were talking about Annihilation and the giant flying birds from Bourne. What's your connection to eco matters, and how did you get into that in your life?
Well, I mean, the kind of micro answer is that there's this one particular moment in my life in Cusco, very sick from asthma, looking out a hotel window, seeing these hummingbirds in this courtship ritual, and it being very surreal and hallucinatory because I was so sick and I was on an oxygen tank. And the mystery and the beauty of that just kind of, I think, made me want to be a writer, to try to explore what that moment meant. And then more widely, I grew up in Fiji, which was a tropical paradise. We lived right near the harbor. You could walk right down to the beach and there were fish and seashells and birds everywhere. So that's what my life has been, especially then moving to North Florida, where we have a similar kind of almost subtropical atmosphere. And so it's something that's very precious to me and that I want to see us preserve because I think it's important to our own well-being.
Yeah, it must have been very interesting having that kind of front and center experience with things that connect you so highly to nature, while at the same time, asthma is something that we share, and it's almost impossible to explain to anybody unless they have also had that experience. What it's like being unable to breathe.
Right, you definitely feel like you're dying at points, and I think the juxtaposition of that and the tropical paradise is also something you see a tension in my fiction between, difficulties of the body and the beauty of the world around, and kind of the contradictions of all of this.
Yeah, very much so. That's very interesting, Laura.
Yes, and the character development in particular is just so brilliantly done with Jane.
It's amazing.
How do you approach writing a believable character and, more importantly, a believable female character?
It's a good question. I mean, all my books are dedicated to Anne, my wife, and in part it's because I basically like run scenes by her from time to time while I'm writing the rough draft. And here in particular, where she was a software manager who at one point wanted to be a homicide detective and then got caught up in statistics and whatnot, which is somewhat similar to Jane as a security analyst who wanted to be a detective. And is working in a male-dominated workplace like Anne, that gave me some insight into the character and an anchor. The physicality gave me an anchor. The fact that, you know, I can't jog to save my life, but I one thing I can do consistently, even though it hasn't taken during the pandemic because of no gym access, is simply I can lift heavy objects and continue to want to lift heavy objects. And so knowing the gym, even though it's very different for Jane, in her experience of the gym, gives me some other anchor. And so those are the kinds of things that help. And then there's, you know, bringing your imagination to it and just trying to be true to what you think the character is going to do.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned in previous interviews about your kind of research process for books. So how does that work for you?
It's a very lazy process. I spend a lot of time thinking about the book and not writing anything down because I'm also lazy and that I don't want to have to write more than I need to. So, but also I found that I can always write a book too early, but never too late somehow. But anyway, so I do a lot of environmental research because I'm active in environmental causes. And so it's kind of in the back of my head anyway, but I figure anything that stays with me by the time I'm about ready to write a book with an ecological theme is what's important and what will interest the reader. And that's what goes in. And so it's very organic.
Yes, yeah. We have to, I think we have to mention now the taxidermied titular hummingbird salamander. So what are your interests or experiences in taxidermy?
The closest thing I have to taxidermy is this little guy who's actually a stuffed animal.
It's great. It's great to see him again, to be honest.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that, you know, sometimes you channel what you think into the main character, and Jane is not really a fan of taxidermy because she associates it with like bars where you see like a bear's head over the bar, which is to me very disconcerting. Often what I apply is like, how would you feel about this if it was actually a human being? Not to be macabre, but that's really kind of how I feel about taxidermy, even though I think there's some interesting cultural things that novelists have explored. But the Tuesday Society, I think you said, sounds like a fairly interesting place, although maybe a little more horrifying for me than some people.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I think interesting place is very charitable. I think Dodd finds it very interesting. I would insert the word horrifying and also the phrase a place I never intend on visiting. You know, I always associate, and we might have talked about this before, but I always associate taxidermy more than anything with Planet of the Apes and the scene where he finds all his fellow astronauts essentially stuff.
Right.
And that, you know, and the idea, I really do, what you're saying really resonates with me, because there are two places in the world where I think I've seen more taxidermy than anywhere else. One of those places is Scotland. So you go up in a lot of the traditional, like kind of Scottish hunting areas, you'll often see things up on the walls when you're having a nice whiskey. Yeah. And the other place is Texas, and Texas seems to be full of taxidermy wherever you go. You know, you go to barbecue. I think there's a place called, I think I might get this right, in Dallas. It's a barbecue joint called Angelo's, I think, and that has a massive stuffed bear as you walk in. Like it's not a facsimile of a stuffed bear, stuffed bear.
And I think that it's one of those things where, you know, culturally it's more or less acceptable, so we often don't really even see it. But it's one of those things that in the book I wanted you to really think about and see, because, you know, as we walk through all the things that are culturally acceptable in our lives, every once in a while there's something that you wake up a second and you're like, wait a second, why am I looking at this? Why is this here? You know, so that's kind of reflected in the novel.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I think that's an excellent theme, actually. I mean, to digress again for a second, it's kind of like once upon a time, I guess the concept of being like a big game hunter was considered to be the epitome of cool and like dashing and amazing. And now you see those pictures, those kind of Trumpian CEOs, you know, going on these like curated tours. It's horrifying, right?
Yeah, it's basically a status symbol thing that's really outdated and in a world where we have a lot of scarcity. But there was also, and I don't know if I remember mentioned this before, but Fur Town, the book that's mentioned, in the novel is actually this real book, and it deals in part with taxidermy and furs. And it was this propaganda piece in the 1930s by the fur industry to try to convince you that animals were happy about being turned into furs and taxidermy. So, so weird.
Yeah, so very, very strange. So, yeah. I feel certain that's not their actual view, which I'm sure.
No, I'm fairly sure too.
Now, congratulations on Hummingbird Salamander, another stunning book and a great read with a lot to say, but also once again being adapted for Netflix. What can you tell us about that process? Do you have any involvement yourself? What's your relationship with the production?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be a creative consultant. Hopefully I'll get a chance to look at the script. And I know that right now they're basically talking to writers for that, because I am still a novelist and want to remain a novelist and not be subsumed by Hollywood. So they're working on getting a writer right now. And I'm very hopeful that this will move forward soon, now that the pandemic is at least not in the rear view mirror, but in the side view mirror, right? So
yeah, right on. Running a pace with us, right. Through the safari park.
Hopefully we're going to outrun it now. So.
Yeah. Oh, well, I can't wait, and I'm sure everybody watching this interview is in the same boat as myself and Dodd. And once again, myself and Laura are here with Jeff VanderMeer talking about his epic new novel, Hummingbird Salamander, which you can order from the links attached to this interview. This has been Forbidden Planet TV, and Jeff, thanks so much for joining us, mate.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I had a blast.
I'll see you again very soon. Take care. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.